Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our NAR event. I know it's an important topic you guys have heard a lot about. And at Bison Ventures trying to strive to be the leaders in informed lending, it's important to us and one of our strategic objectives to bring education, bring value to the whole ecosystem of real estate so we can all learn together and kind of power through the storm, if you will. So I'm going to get right into it. This is kind of the so now what in terms of the NAR settlement, what's going on. I'm sure people still have questions, and we've got three amazing panelists today that we've brought on, and I'm just going to quickly introduce them and give you guys a quick bio. Thankfully, the Bison team gave me the bio, so I didn't have to memorize it, so this should go smoothly. First, we've got Mr. Aaron Nguyen. He is the General Counsel for the Arizona Association of Realtors. He graduated from law school at ASU in 1999, earning academic honors of law review as his associate editor of the Arizona State Law Journal. Aaron concentrated his legal practice on all aspects of real estate law, has served on numerous expert panels and taught continuing education classes to licensees for over a decade. Beginning in July of 23, Aaron serves as the General Counsel for Association of Realtors. So thanks for coming, Aaron. Appreciate having you. You're definitely much smarter than I am. Carin. We have Carin Nguyen, who's the founder of the CNREN Real Estate Network, who I'm sure you've heard of. She's a wife and mother, raising her 4 children and co-leading one of the nation's top real estate teams with her husband, San. Her team has been ranked as high as number 2 in the U.S. by Real Trends, published in the Wall Street Journal. She has personally sold more than 2,000 homes and is an Arizona native with a background in lending prior to her 20 years in real estate. So Carin always makes me nervous when I talk about loans because she has a background, so I hope what I'm saying is correct. And last but not least, my friend Tucker Blalock, the managing partner and co-founder of the Brokery, very reputable organization in town. Tucker served in the Marine Corps. Thank you for your service. And after graduating from ASU with a business degree, he co-founded the Brokery. Leading the Brokery, Tucker has provided his dynamic sales approach and has grown the company from $0 to over $360 million in annual sales, which is incredible. In 2023, Tucker won the prestigious Phoenix Business Journal 40 Under 40 Award, and he continues to spend time on a lot of charity missions, in his off time. So thank you guys all for coming. You guys are all top-notch professionals, and I'm excited to have you here. And we know your time's valuable, so thanks for doing this. So I'm going to jump right in with Mr. Aaron Nguyen, who is arguably the legal NAR expert, so that's why we brought him in. And I'm just, one thing that's interesting about the timing of this event, we set the date on this, I don't even know how long ago, probably a few months ago. And just yesterday, my understanding is, and Aaron will help clarify, some of the forms for the is it AAR? Yeah. AAR, I didn't know if I was missing an A. AAR just are getting finalized as we speak, and there was some big news yesterday with that. So I think with that being said, Aaron, if you don't mind giving us a kind of a state of the union on what's going on in your world, and we can go from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the NAR settlement practice changes need to be implemented by August 17th. We typically do forms at certain times, so we're trying to get those done quickly. And also there's issues with vendors because this is nationwide, so foreign vendors from around the nation have to implement all this. So we have 18 new and revised forms dealing with the settlement practice changes. Half of them have been fully approved, and yesterday the Risk Management Committee approved the last batch of the last 9. So we will get those to our form vendors hopefully by June 18th, and hopefully they will have those ready to go on August 1st, which is when we anticipate that we will release and distribute those forms. The very lawyerly on or about August 1st, depending on how our form vendors can get it done.
And is there anything on those forms you can share now that would be good for all of us to know? Anything that would be either a surprise or something that maybe it's all expected, but I think it'd be great to know some detail on them.
No, absolutely. The practice changes are pretty significant. So it's something that there's a lot of big changes. It's going to take a little time to get used to and kind of digest, which is why we're really trying to get the forms done so we can move on to education. But basically Listing agreement is going to change. It's going to kind of be inverted. So before the listing agent and the seller would sit down and negotiate a total commission first, and then part of that would be designated to offer to a cooperating buyer's agent. It's now going to be inverted. So now the listing agent will negotiate their compensation, and then there will be potential add-ons. So if you want to offer compensation to a buyer's agent, you will then add that on as additional compensation. And we also have another term available for unrepresented buyers. Some of our members felt that it was more work and more risk, and they wanted to be able to negotiate a higher compensation in those areas. So again, most of the forms are meant to be flexible and allow different things to happen, and that's reflected in the exclusive listing agreement. On the opposite side, we have buyer forms. The buyer-broker exclusive employment agreement has been heavily revised also. The biggest change is that pursuant to the settlement, the buyer-broker cannot receive any amounts above and beyond what's negotiated in their employment agreement. So basically it says that if offered compensation exceeds the amount negotiated, that will be flowing to the buyer as a credit. So that's kind of the biggest change there. In addition, because written agreements are now going to be required for buyer agents up front, we've also created a new form, which is non-exclusive. That is called the buyer-broker agreement to show property. And that is kind of a lot more risky for our members, so we really need to educate them that, unlike the exclusive where you get paid as long as the buyer buys a house, for the non-exclusive, you have to be representing the buyer in that sale transaction. And you have to be listed on the purchase contract, and if that doesn't happen, then you've not earned a commission. So that's a very new form. It's something that we're really going to try to make sure that our members understand the differences and how to use these forms.
I have a question for everybody on this call that's not a realtor. And back to the employment contract part, how many brokerages, or how common is that a brokerage would have, have in that agreement that an amount that would be lower than what an agent could potentially negotiate, if that makes sense? How often is that going to happen where an agent thinks they're going to negotiate X for that commission fee, but then that extra surplus flows to the buyer, which is interesting because their employment contract says that's too much?
And that's exactly it. So currently the buyer-broker exclusive employment agreement, it says X amount or what's offered by the seller, whichever is higher. So people that are currently using theirs on a realtor's current form, you negotiate kind of a bottom, where now you need to negotiate kind of a top, because if any additional amounts are offered, you're not going to receive those. So it's a big shift, and it's a big change, and again, it'll be a little time to get used to. So we'll talk about education in a moment, but let me talk about two other forms that are going to be very important kind of moving forward, and these are brand new forms. One is because there is no more compensation offered on the MLS going forward, we will have a new broker-to-broker form, which is the compensation agreement between brokers, where if a broker is advertising compensation on their website or somewhere else off the MLS, there needs to be a mechanism for the buyer's agent to accept that offer and get it legal and enforceable. So that will be the new form available to do that. And again, there's some nuances to that. And then the final form is an addendum to the purchase contract where the buyer can ask for the seller to compensate their broker directly as part of the purchase contract. And again, that's a very big shift. Before we always said you should keep commissions out of the purchase contract, and now there's a specific addendum where the buyer can do so. And again, there's some nuances to this. So there's a lot of new forms, a lot of revisions, major revisions to existing forms So it's a lot to prepare for, and we've got between now and August 1st to do that.
Got it. Well, sounds a little bit like the mortgage industry journey I've been on. Lots of new documents and forms and regulations. Tucker?
I'd like to ask a question, Aaron, regarding where in the buyer broker we used to get the greater of. Why are they now going the opposite way? What was the impetus for that? Why are they doing that?
Yeah, almost everything is coming from the NAR settlement. So the NAR settlement requires that there has to be a ascertainable amount in these written agreements with the buyer broker and the buyer, and it cannot be
Open-ended.
Open-ended,
Gotcha.
correct. So you can't have whatever the seller's willing to offer. So because of that, you really needed a specific or definitive either rate or compensation amount. And the buyer broker is prohibited from receiving any amounts above that. So we wanted to address, well, where does those funds go? And again, we have work groups and committees that do our forms, lots of different brokers and agents, trying to figure out, well, what should we do? Should it go back to the seller? Should it go?
Right.
So again, that was something that was heavily discussed and thought about and felt this was the best path and route forward.
Okay. That helps. Thank you.
Of course.
And just so everyone knows, there's a lot of questions coming in on the chat line. We'll do a Q&A with Aaron once we're done going through the main topic, so just hang tight for that. So I do have a question. So with AAR, what are you guys doing proactively, at least thinking through how you're going to help agents transition through this, like the education piece, as you mentioned earlier? And on top of that, we've even seen it. It's almost like, what do we help educate agents on what they should and shouldn't say in the commission discussion with whether it's the client, other parties? I would love to hear your take on that.
Sure. So let me answer those kind of one at a time. So as soon as the NAR settlement was announced, we knew we had a very short amount of time and a lot of work to do. I've been kind of using the metaphor eating the elephant. You know, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So we're just doing it one bite at a time. The first was the forms, because we needed to get those done and get them to our vendors. So now we're kind of pivoting towards education, which we knew would be very, very important. So we have a couple things coming up. Sorry, I have to look. June 24th, we're having 2 training Zoom, I'm not good with technology, Zoom broadcasts. And those are just for brokers. So if you're a designated broker or a managing broker, you can sign up for those. We're doing 2 of them on the 24th. I think 500 have already signed up, and we have room for like 100 more. The following day, on June 25th, we have another Zoom for instructors. So if you're an instructor and you teach CE classes, that's available just for you. And also, if you're an industry partner, we have one on July 11th. That's just for escrow and lending, because again, you know, we're all involved in this. It's a big shift for the industry, so we really want to make sure everybody's on the same page as much as possible to make the transition as smooth as possible. Once we're going to record the broadcast on the June 24th. So a few days, maybe a week after that, we will post that on our website. It'll be available to everybody, all 50,000 plus of our members, all of industry partners. Well, I guess industry partners don't have access to our website, but all of our members will have access to it. And we're also going to do it in different chunks. So there'll be one on buyer broker agreements, one on listing agreements, and we'll just chunk it up so you can kind of watch it and rewatch it. Again, it's a complete shift from dealing with the work group. It's really taken a meeting or two just to kind of absorb the changes before you can actually look at the forms and understand how they kind of work together a little bit. So we will be doing that. And then also in July, we typically communicate with our members via The Voice, which is an email that comes out every Tuesday. It just hit my inbox about 10 minutes ago. In July, at least 4, maybe all 5 of the Tuesdays, we'll be releasing kind of red line samples of the new forms and the revised forms, and I'm going to kind of chunk it up again. So we'll do kind of listing 1 week. We'll have FAQs, best practices, what the changes are, and kind of really try to have the education every week coming out of here's some of the important forms that be aware of the changes, how they work together, and again, the FAQs of best practices and what they mean and what they don't mean. So that's really the bulk of our education that's coming out over the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
Do you guys have, is there any sort of hotline per se that an agent can call or email and ask questions that might not be in the FAQs?
So we do have a free member benefit to our members where designated brokers and managing brokers can call into a legal hotline. So that's a free member benefit. So if you're an agent and you have questions, the first place to always go is your broker. Sometimes you're going to have broker policies that are different than the associations. Our forms are, again, a free member benefit to our agents, but they're not required. Some brokers will have their own forms or choose to modify them. So you always want to go to your broker first. And again, if the broker has any questions or is unclear, then they have the benefit of the legal hotline and they can call. It's, I forget the firm, Zelms, Erlich, one more in Mac, Rick Mack's firm.
Yeah, it's changed.
I used to be a hotline attorney with a different firm a long, long time ago. But Rick and his team are available to answer all those questions as well.
Awesome. Well, this whole time you were talking, they've had your cell phone number flashing at the bottom of the screen. So back to what should agents say, not say in the discussion about the whole commission topics. I feel like that's a big one. Everyone's sort of dancing on eggshells, like, what should I say? Am I saying too much? Am I saying too little? I mean, I would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that keeps me up at night. Again, the settlement's not even fully approved yet. And we've got a huge target on our backs. There's sharks in the water. And we really need to do a much better job going forward of not doing stupid things that give people evidence and ammunition to sue us in the future. So I did a antitrust video that went out in The Voice a couple weeks ago. I would really love it if all of our members watched it. It's something that concerns me. Numbers should never really be talked about. What you and your brokerage charge should really not be talked about in public. You really shouldn't be talking about what your competitors charge. Again, we're being accused of collaborating and conspiring to artificially set an amount. So it's just not appropriate, especially forums like this where competitors come together. You really need to be careful that you're really not talking about, what broker A charges or what broker B charges. I've implemented fruit that we've done in the work group. So we talk about buyers negotiating oranges, sellers offering watermelons. You will see that in the education that comes out. So I think that's the safest route to go. I'm a big fan of that. And again, it also is talked about in the video as well. When you're sitting down with the public in almost any setting, you should never say, and this is just lazy, hey, I charge a watermelon, and that's what everybody else charges. You can't get away from it. You just have to take it. I'm terrible, but you don't have any other options. Like, you should never say things like that ever. Talk about what you charge and justify it. I charge this, and here's why. Here's what I'm going to do for you. Here's the benefit. Really concentrating on that is the way to go. And anytime you're in a forum on social media, which I don't participate in, but if you do social media and you're talking with competitors, don't talk about numbers. Don't talk about what your competitors charge. Don't talk about what you charge.
And that's a great point too for, all of us are in sales at some degree, right? I feel like everybody in their life is in sales in some degree, whether it's their profession or not. And I think that's just a good tip for everybody that I believe it's going to be a big differentiator moving forward for those that are forced to get better sales techniques, better tactics, speak like that, use that kind of language. And I think it's good for everybody. It's good for the industry. I think it levels up the professionalism. So I think that's great. That's a great point. So before I get to some of the Q&A, I do want to ask you this. So, and whether you're comfortable or not answering, I'm going to ask it anyway. So is there, and maybe this is a dumb question, what is AAR's position on the NAR settlement at the 30,000 foot view? I mean, how do you guys feel about it? what's the emotional scale there? What do you like? What don't you like? Whatever you feel like sharing.
No, absolutely. So obviously we're very happy about the NAR settlement. We feel like it was the right decision and the right path forward. The association did get sued here in Arizona. That lawsuit is currently being stayed, and we're part of the settlement class, so hopefully that will be settled once we get final approval. But we hired very, very good attorneys who charge a very, very high rates, and it's an awful lot of money, and it's awful. There's, your best day in court is spending millions and millions of dollars in attorney's fees, so we think that's horrific. And it's also the practice changes. I think the practice changes, if they're embraced and implemented, I think it will keep our industry safe. I think it'll keep our members safe for the future. It really kind of addresses some of the key concerns that the Department of Justice had. So we feel like it's a really good path forward. The biggest concerns is that it's big changes in a very short amount of time. So I would have loved to have had a little more time to do all this work for sure. And again, it concerns me that there's chatter out there that we're going to fight the changes and not do it, or try to find ways around it, or I just think that's not a wise decision or path. I'm going to give you guys a plug because I heard it from somewhere else on a podcast, but they said, there's a difference between, the bison and the cow. The cow sees the storm coming and tries to get away from it and walks away from it and ends up being in the storm a lot longer. Where if you're a bison, you just see the storm and you just head right into it and you get it over with quicker, and then life can go back to normal and be positive.
And it's proactive. And you may probably know this, maybe you don't, but that is one of the main reasons why we came up with the name Bison for our company. There's a lot of other layers to it, but that was it. Right? Manage the chaos, get through it as fast as you can, be problem solvers. So thank you for the unadvertised plug.
All the money spent on marketing.
Yeah, it's all good. I mean, gosh, let's get this guy some Bison swag in here.
We represent our members.
Yes,
we don't care who you use for a living.
You're so lawyery.
Completely unintended, but
we're gonna go to the Q&A so we can keep things on track, and all that is awesome, Aaron. So I'm gonna read these guys, so hopefully they come across correctly. Beverly is asking you, how can the extra flow go to the buyer if it's an extra commission? And the commission can't be paid to a non-broker, correct?
That is correct. So the way regulation in Arizona is the commission is always from the broker. So the broker is the one that enters into employment agreements, and the broker is the only one that can get compensated or paid under our regulatory system. And it's really just in the buyer-broker agreements. So the buyer-broker agreements with the buyer say, I'm negotiated X as my compensation. If the seller is offering additional compensation, I will accept that. And if there's any additional, I will credit to you as long as your lender allows for it. Just like it also says, if the seller compensation is not there, then this buyer can either request the seller to pay for it in the purchase contract or can pay it out of pocket. So again, that's all in the agreements.
I'm hearing the question asked as though, how can a buyer actually collect a commission? Because it's an overflow of commission. But what I'm hearing you say is, really it's going to become a concession. It becomes a concession from seller to buyer if there is an additional apple to be had that would go to the buyer.
First of all, thank you for the apple. Yes. So the way I would look at it is if and it's kind of hard not to do it without numbers, so I'm going to do my best here. But if I negotiate with my buyer an apple and the seller is offering 2 apples, then basically I'm accepting those 2 apples and I'm keeping one for myself and the other one is being credited to the buyer.
But and not as a commission. It's not being, she's asking, how can they get paid a commission if they're not a broker?
It's not a commission, I guess is the only way of doing it. And if you look at the regulatory, it's almost like a refund of compensation, which has always been allowed, and or it doesn't require a license because they're not doing activities for compensation that require a license
Okay.
because they're the principal in the transaction. So if that helps,
sense.
Yeah, makes
a
sense.
way of looking at it, I guess you could also say, hey, seller, keep your additional apple. I'm just going to give you your list price minus an apple, and it'll all kind of work out one way or the other.
All right, so we've got a bunch of questions, but in light of everyone's time, I'm gonna ask you one more, and then the rest of them, guys, we'll get you the answers to, so we won't leave you hanging. Another one is, so if a buyer broker signed with 3% and the seller is paying 2.5%, does the buyer have to pay the 0.5%?
So again, I hate numbers, but I understand it. Yeah, if the seller is not offering compensation, that fully compensates the buyer amount that's been negotiated with the buyer, then yes, the buyer is contractually obligated to pay the difference.
Got it.
But again, keep in mind, there's a new purchase contract addendum where the buyer can request the seller to make up that difference between the orange and the apple. So they don't have to pay for it out of pocket.
Okay, and on the heels of that,
Stuart, can I jump
yeah,
in
go
real
ahead.
quick?
Yeah.
In that situation where they need to go and get the extra half apple, how do we go about doing that? I think a lot of agents have had that question. What's the best means of doing that? Is that outside of escrow through legal means? If they're not paying, what is the right route for that?
The correct route is the addendum. So it's called the seller compensation addendum.
Yep.
And it basically tries to include everything. 'Cause
I'm sorry, no, if your buyer is going to owe you another half.
Oh, yeah, just pay it through escrow.
But if they don't and you need to go and get that from them, you go through your legal channel to do that?
So, I mean,
You would need to hire an attorney essentially to go back and get that half?
potentially. The current purchase contract says it's kind of a condition of closing.
Okay.
So potentially the buyer's agent can say, hey, you promised to pay me the, orange minus an apple.
But I thought
the
commission
difference.
can never hold up a deal. Is that
Yes,
not
but,
correct?
well, no. There's a Arizona administrative rule, just R4-28-1101, if you're looking for it, that basically says, yes, commission disputes cannot hold up a deal, but it also says that you do not have to, or you're not obligated to change your compensation agreement, and you insisting upon your compensation agreement is not a dispute that holds up escrow. So in other words, and it kind of makes sense if you think about it, right? If you're the seller and you're like, hey, I've negotiated to pay you an orange as my listing broker, and then I'm under contract and says, hey, I'm not going to pay you the orange. You're obligated to take less. No, of course you're not obligated to take less,
Right.
and that's not a dispute for those purposes.
Okay.
I think I can answer that piece of it, though, because our team has actually been collecting a difference above what the old rules were. And how we were doing that is getting the current buyer-broker agreement completed, obviously signed from the buyer, and then we would turn that in to escrow and to the lender, because if there's a difference that needs to get paid, it also needs to be disclosed to the lender. It affects the till, all the disclosures, and we haven't had any issues with that. We have slight issues sometimes if the lender doesn't see it. So working with who you work with matters, but we have not had any issues with escrow taking that as an AAR form, adding that to the settlement statement as one of the buyer's closing costs, and then the buyer coming in with that amount as a closing cost at closing.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
And I would just add on that too, that we've noticed on our side, on the lending side, you can see everything, like, it takes an evolution for people to figure it out and make it habit, right? And so we've seen issues, nothing major, but where the addendums or things like this come in later in the transaction, or maybe it went to the title company, somehow we never got it. So we've had a couple where last minute our funders are balancing with title, as someone's signing loan docs, and there's this other fee or something in there that's different from the one they signed before for whatever their reasons are, which is fine, but it's just all about communication, and I think that's one of the big things you guys are probably doing for, coaching
We have it
your agents.
automated for that reason,
Yeah.
because we can't trust somebody to manually not push that out at the right time.
And Sue, are you coaching your buyers through the process of having enough reserves to pay commissions potentially? Is that something that you are now talking about in your talk track?
That's a great question. I don't think we're talking about it that directly, and I think the reason I answer it that way right now is there's a little bit of it's like when someone asks us a tax question, like, hey, when I sell my house, what's the deal? I have to live in it for how many years, how many to not pay capital gains? And even though we might know the answer, we're always going to say, we're not your tax expert, call your CPA. So there's a version of us not wanting to get involved in your commission discussions and any of that. But from an overarching educational standpoint, yeah, I do think it's important to say, hey, if you're aware of the changes, or maybe if they ask the question, we'll just give them a very general answer that, yes, this is something you need to talk to Tucker about. But keep in mind, if you do need to pay for these, that's going to need to be in your total cash to close, and be prepared for that, right? So, yeah,
Can I
that's a
ask
great
like
question.
one super quick question to Aaron? It's on the non-exclusive buyer-broker employment agreement. Does that negate procuring cause, or do you think that that does still preserve procuring cause if we showed a home to that client during that time while under that agreement?
Yeah, so that for all intents and purposes in Arizona, procuring cause will not exist as far as through association forms.
Yes.
There are some other states that are kind of keeping it alive, but we felt that was problematic from a number of reasons. So we don't feel like that's the best path forward.
Okay.
And the main reason is kind of how do you do that? Procuring cause was kind of funky to deal with the MLS, and where you could change the offer and have it visible. How do you put that on a broker's website, and what if it changes, and how do you know what I mean? It just it seemed very, very difficult. So we thought it was cleaner and easier to just say we're not going to have procuring cause. And again, the non-exclusive, you're really flying without a net, because you have to write that contract, or you don't have any basis to get paid.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's what I heard. So I just wanted to clarify
It is correct.
when I heard you say that way.
No, you
Thank
are correct.
So I'm going to wrap up with you, Aaron, to keep everything moving, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming in. We know your time is valuable. You are no question a critical component, you and your organization, to this whole community, what you guys are doing and helping protect everybody, including the client and the consumer, which is important. So thanks for being a part of this today. And all you guys that have asked questions that we haven't got your answers to yet, we'll get with Aaron directly after this, get the answers straight from him, and then we'll get them out to you. So thank you, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Aaron.
I'll see you guys.
All right, so Tucker and Carin, as I said earlier, these guys I see firsthand are so proactive in managing their firms and being in front of their people and educating. And we've just noticed you guys being in front of this whole thing in a very professional, top-notch way. So I think the first thing I'm going to ask you guys is how are you preparing your agents and your group for these conversations? How you're educating them? I'm sure they're asking you a million questions.
Yeah, I think we're getting more questions than we can answer at the moment, because as you can see, we're still shooting from the hip with documentation and how we're going about this. We don't even have the legal forms in front of us to really teach and educate on. But we're doing our best regarding the presentation of a buyer presentation, at least at the Brokery. And we have 80 agents, so at this point, it seems like every day I'm doing a new training regarding one point or another. I'm sure you are as well. But yeah, for the most part, we've been shooting from the hip, but getting people to understand what they're in for with the buyer presentation is where I've been at.
Yeah. I think number one is to have clarity, because there's a lot of incorrect information that exists out there about what the settlement is, like what it says we can and cannot do. So I think it's continuously, right when I think we're clear, then somebody will say something like, okay, we're still not clear. So it's continuously having these conversations about what we can and cannot do. I actually took a takeaway, like we're going to make a document of the things that you cannot say, because invariably we're just used to saying some of the things that we've said and they've been okay and they're not anymore. I think the other piece that's really important, and that we've been focusing, I think, harder, more intentionally lately, is on the mindset and how people feel about change, right? I've been doing this 20 years, going to my 21st year, and what being in the industry has taught me is that when I can pivot quickly, not only do I survive, because I've watched some people not survive, it's actually a giant win and huge opportunity. And so it's given me a different belief, and I think a lot of people have about change, where, Aaron talked about the cow and the bison, right? Like, are you running towards it? Or are you just kind of with apprehension in the background? What we know is, we don't know some of the I's dotted and T's crossed of all of this, but we know most of the big specifics that are changing, and that we're going to have to adapt our process and how we articulate that value to the clients. So I think it's if your mindset isn't in the right space, we're doing trainings on that pretty consistently. Like, how do you feel about change? How can we change how you feel about change? Like, where's the time in your life where you actually changed really quickly and it turned out really well? And when you changed really slow and it didn't go really well, like, focus on those, because if we can adapt, that's going to get a much better outcome for you than just like waiting on the sideline and not being ready for the change. Because I think the other big piece is that we're going to start being compensated on our skill set and our competency, and not just our effort and our charisma. That's going to be a huge change. And some people are really worried about that. And they should be, if they're not going to make a focus on becoming much more competent and mastering some of these pieces that are valuable to the agents. So the next is we have a list of all the things. Okay, well, where do we need to step up the skill and the confidence for the agents, and bring those trainings in so that they have confidence, but that confidence comes through the competency. And that's also where you can relate the value.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that leads me kind of back to earlier when I made the comment about the mortgage business, right? All the changes we've been through, the regulations. And, I feel like a year ago when we were dealing with rates all of a sudden being so high overnight, the negativity is everywhere, right? Every phone call with the clients is negative. What do you mean that's my rate, right? And we kind of went through that and we're out of that now. Thankfully, people are more understanding of where the market is. But it's one of those things where we have to lean on each other on those experiences and help people who haven't been through this. And to your point, Carin, I mean, positivity is a magnet, I believe. So if you're a leader, or if everybody's a leader in their own right, if you're not bringing the positivity to the world around you in work, it's just going to affect everything else, right? Your clients, the guys are going to kill me that I'm going to use this analogy again, but I used this one the other day. But it's like if you were on a plane and it wasn't going well, high turbulence, things are getting a little shifty, and you've pulled the curtain and looked at both pilots, and one pilot was freaking out and one pilot was just sitting there calm, which one of those guys are you going to want to follow, right? It's the calm guy. We got to be the calm head in the chaotic storm. And so where that leads me is, I'm curious, how are you guys, I can only imagine when this went down, your agents are calling you and they're potentially saying, my conversations with the clients are changing. They're feeling negative, right? They're feeling like, oh, hey, I don't have to pay you this much anymore. And what do you do for me that the other guy doesn't do for me, right? So how are you guys helping your agents, I hate you saying sell, but sell their their value proposition and justifying, their commission? Yeah.
I mean, at the Brokery, I don't bring up the core values very often, but two of them actually. One is be nimble, positive mental attitude, and embracing change. So three of them we hit out of the four literally in this conversation. But again, going back to what we're training agents on right now, it is the unique selling proposition. That's all that we're talking about, because of the forums we have no idea. But the unique selling proposition, and I've picked this up from a lot of people in the industry. I've been going to a lot of different talks and things, and listening to just people, even not in my space. We serve mostly a luxury space, kind of in the Biltmore Arcadia locations, but I'm listening to guys that run teams out in the East Valley. They just do a ton of volume, and I pick up a lot from them as well. But what we're talking about, unique selling propositions, is number one, off-market opportunities. I'm going to show you more than anybody else is in this market. I'm going to bring opportunities to you that you can't find on Zillow, you can't find on the MLS, and they're going to come through me. Number two, I'm going to become the family office. So all of my vendors, all of my exclusive contacts that I've built years and years and decades in the business, you now have access to. So exclusive access to my family office. And then the third one is negotiation. And when I say negotiation, you can't simply say, I'm the best negotiator, I'm the most ethical person, I'm the most professional. That only goes so far. So when I talk about negotiation, I've actually created case studies around times I've saved people $175,000 during a transaction. And I've written those things down. I have them here, and I will have Trey pull them up once we get off the live. But I have case studies for all of those things written out, 3 or 4 of them, about times I've saved people money and how I saved them money. So something tangible that I will hand to them at our buyer presentation. So things like that, I'm creating more content around what we're doing now than ever before.
Yeah, similar. I think maybe the historical norm has been search for properties, and then you have these online portals, so that's not been our value as agents, right, to search and find the property. Now it's opened the door. It's like, okay, well, that's not the value, so like, what is the value that the agents do? And for us, it's been much more trying to understand the position of the buyer, not the bedrooms, baths, lot size. It's like, okay, what are you really trying to accomplish? Why are you trying to accomplish that? What happens if you're not able, what's the plan B, so that you can see all of the moving pieces? And then once you understand that, now we really need to put an advisor hat on. Like, it's really looking at ourselves like home wealth consultants and home wealth advisors, just like I would look at my financial advisor. Right. And if my financial advisor is just like running me out or trying to make a trade without my permission, you know, I'm not going to have trust in him. And so it establishes trust when we're asking deeper level questions and then going through all the options. So from like a UVP standpoint for us, it's more of what's the problem that you're anticipating, because not everybody is like 700 plus credit score and has a plethora of money to put down, or they have a home to sell and they don't want to be homeless. So it's what things in our tool belt do we have, and do our agents know just enough about it that they can offer all of those options. Also, manufacturing off market inventory, I think, is going to be a huge one that's going to differentiate. People haven't had to do that as much before. And then the other piece is like having a proven process. So one of the things that the president of Real Broker, Carin Shrivatsa, says quite oftenly is to showcase the complexity, but deliver the simplicity. And so that's part of why we're in this with the consumer, is that they think all we do is like pull up something, or they hand us a house and we open the door and we fill out some papers and voila, that's how it goes. And that's not it at all. And I used to be so excited when my buyers or sellers would say, like, that was so easy, I'm going to go get my license. I took it as I probably did a great job because I didn't, let you see all the emotions. But we need to actually showcase more of the complexity of what we're doing. And that needs to be upfront, showing the journey and the proven process, and being okay with agents that we're willing to take the time. I think it's a fast-paced society. So what I hear most from our agents is they don't want to do that because they're like, the buyers just want to go see the house. Like, we just need to get them in the car. I'm going to lose them. If I do all of that, I'm going to lose them. And it's like, no, actually, that's how you got them. Right. Because you're bringing them in and they can see that you're willing to slow down, really listen to them, understand what they're trying to accomplish, and then they really trust you, and then you really got them. But like throwing them in the car and hoping the first one or two is the right house, you definitely don't have them. And now this whole thing is really forcing this to change, which I think is actually a really great thing for the industry.
And I'm approaching this just like I would a listing appointment. The day before my listing appointment, I drop off a box at the seller's property. I show up the next day, I give them my presentation, then I follow up with a follow-up gift the next day. Exact same process for my buyer presentation. They're going to come into my office. I'm going to give them some tangible items prior to them coming, such as a case study where I save some people some money, maybe a few other exclusive things that I'm offering, kind of as a freebie to get them to buy in and understand my value. Then when they show up, they already know about what I do, what I'm about. And then after that, I'm following up again. But you have to treat it very much like a listing presentation and provide as much value as you can, because you're not going to be eating anymore if you can't really sustain in the new real estate world here.
That well said. Well, you guys are definitely pros, because I had some few other questions, but you already just answered all of them. I mean, one of them was going to be, what's a direct response to a seller, let's say, kind of questioning your commission, but you just answered that. I mean, it's value. It's how you approach it. I don't know if either of you has a specific example you want to share. No problem if not. As far as, has this happened to you? Have you had a seller or a buyer kind of just hit you in the head, first meeting, first sentence, hey, Carin, Tucker, I see this thing in the news, like, what's going on? Like, how, why am I going to pay this much if I don't have to? Like, have you guys dealt with that in that kind of a straight up form?
All the time. I mean, the commissions have always been negotiable. Yeah, commissions have always been negotiable, and we reiterate that to them. We've been on the talk track for the past few years anyways, for our listing commission, where we have always said, I charge 3 apples. You can choose to pay 0 to 3 apples to the buyer's broker. But we've been on that track for a long time already, because we found that saying that sounded better than 6 or 5. So we broke our commission out already a few years ago for that reason, because it sounded better. And now it's actually coming to fruition where that's going to help us a lot.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would maybe add to that is a lot of times we hear something as agents. This is where I think if you're newer to the industry, you have a bit of an advantage, because as somebody who's seasoned, we hear something and we go, oh, they're asking me about the commission. And then we start in with this objection handler, right, that we've had in our back pocket. And I think it's really just understanding, like asking another question. So I think so key, can we ask another question? So if they say something to that effect of, so I hear I don't have to pay, commissions anymore. And then just going, oh, well, how do you mean? Oh, well, I read this, and it said that the 6% is going away, or whatever the information is that they give you. But a lot of times we hear just one little snippet, and as the agent we're like, oh my gosh, and all this emotion stirs up inside, and then that kind of translates, and sometimes we just vomit on the seller. So I think if we hear that, We go, oh, okay, you read that article. Okay, let me explain actually what's changing. I think Aaron's not here anymore, but I have actually heard that we're not allowed to say nothing's changing, because that's not true. Like, things are changing, and this is having transparency. So I think it's really just explaining what's going to actually change, since we're not offering compensation in the MLS, and that buyers are going to be paying compensation. Is buyers are already challenged with high interest rates, affordability, struggling with down payment, the pricing, so all of these things. And if they're required to pay a commission up front, you're just narrowing the pool of buyers. So how many buyers do you want to look at your home? And it's your choice. We don't know what they're going to have in agreement with the agent on the other side. They could actually ask for a concession. One of the things that we're training on is, even if a seller isn't offering anything, do we call right now and ask every agent and seller, are you paying concessions? Right. We used to do that actually 20 years ago. We don't do that anymore. We just assume they're going to pay concessions, or we're going to make the offer, and if they pay it, they pay it, and if they don't, we negotiate it. I think it's going to be that same way, but agents, not all agents are going to know to do that, to just submit the offer and ask for the compensation. So I'm going to explain that to the seller and say, so you might have some that just pass your house by. That's up to you. We want to open it up. It's going to be the buyer's choice. It's not the agent choice. Like, we got to be really careful on those steering conversations, but it's educating the seller of how many buyers do you want actually on your home, eyes on your home. What's the frenzy that you want? Pricing is one component, and the commission, the incentive, really, compensation is another piece that goes hand in hand with the pricing.
And to speak on the listing agent side for a while, I mean, we do a lot of the listing side business in the Arcadia and Biltmore neighborhoods. And what I find is that I think this is going to help our business tremendously from a time perspective. A lot of times I'll show up, the agent shows up with a buyer's agent they've never even met, or is not well versed in our area. And that just is a complete waste of time for me. Now when people show up to my listings, I know that they're bona fide buyers that have had that conversation with their buyer's agent, and they're ready to rock. And this buyer's agent's pretty bad, ASS, if they're there with them. So I think that that's a huge thing, a huge positive. We're speaking positives here. I think that that's a huge positive from the listing agent side, is that it's going to save me a boatload of time, and I'm going to be dealing with somebody very competent who's on the other side for me.
Yeah, those are great points. Well, I'm gonna go to Q&A for Carin and Tucker. If you guys have questions, there's already a couple coming in. So this one from Jim is, and this is probably geared towards you, Tucker. How do you manufacture off-market inventory?
There's so many great ways. So I actually brought with me this off-market opportunities binder. I picked this up from a guy named John Gluch. So at John's buyer consultation, so I'll have this sitting on the table. It simply says off-market opportunities on the binder. Inside here, you'll print off any coming soon listings. Obviously, those aren't on Zillow, so they're not going to be able to see those. You'll print off canceled and expired listings. We have what's called Brokery exclusive listings. That's where we have a back-end system that shows all of our Brokery listings. Wholesale, other places you can find off-markets, for sale by owners, anywhere else. I mean, just start stuffing that thing full of off-market property, so when you're meeting with these buyers in person, there's a tangible asset sitting on the table in front of them, showing them that you have resources.
And I have this is my question now that you're saying that. Yeah. Do agents, is there a secret room you guys go into and you talk about which pocket listings, who has what? What's the process for an agent? I'm assuming it's collaborative.
I'm so glad Aaron's left the room, but
he's not. He's in another huddle room being interrogated right now. But you know what I'm saying? How do you guys do that?
Part of being a great agent is being a great networker, and
right.
If you're surrounded by other great agents that work your area, then you're going to have a leg up. 100%.
And I think I bring that up too because I think there's a lot of people that maybe get intimidated or don't want to. They think they're showing their cards by talking to someone else that's a quote unquote competitor. And I probably felt that way in my career in the early stages. But to your point, as soon as you open that up and realize we're all in this together, there's enough business for all of us. Let's all share each other's playbooks. Excuse me. It's amazing the opportunities that come out of that. So I think that's a good takeaway for people. Okay, another question is from Michelle. How do we find out what the seller may be offering for buyer's broker?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. So I think the question is, you're hearing a lot of comparisons to commercial real estate. And so in commercial real estate, it's not posted anywhere. You're calling the listing agent and you're basically asking, hey, is there compensation that's being offered? If so, how much? So I think this actually just means it's a change in our roles as the buyer agent, that we are going to need to do our best to make communication with the listing agent to ask if compensation is being offered, and if so, how much. And then again, if we don't, are we still writing an offer? Again, a lot of times the buyers need concessions. Are we not sending an offer if we don't get a hold of the listing agent? I think it's poor negotiation if you don't try to initiate that conversation. But I get some of them are really hard to get a hold of. So
that's a good issue. Like right now, for example, if you have a home in an HOA and the HOA disclosure is not posted in the documents tab, but you need to write an offer, for example,
yes,
and you're trying to get that from them.
Kind of dangerous to fill that out on your own.
Yeah. So I see that happening more and more, probably going into the future. You need to have a listing agent who's super responsive and hopefully gets you that compensation before you provide the offer.
Hey, which if you are a responsive listing agent, put that in your value proposition,
For sure.
because if you have a listing agent that's not responding and can't answer those questions, I promise you there's going to be buyer opportunities that pass that listing by because they're uncertain of what the answer is. But to point blank answer the question, it would be to contact the listing agent. And if not, you're still using that addendum that Aaron Green spoke about, and you're putting it in the offer to make the ask.
Right. Perfect. Well, I'm going to do just a quick update for all of you guys on kind of in the lending world. And so it's like the FAQs, right? Like you get enough questions enough times, you go, okay, we should get better at answering this, right? So I'll tell you guys just a couple that we've hit, and we'll only take a minute on this, and then we can wrap up for everybody. But one of the big questions was, does the recently announced NAR settlement change the way all of this happens? Does it change access to mortgages for buyers? And the answer is no. Under the settlement, buyers still have the same options when it comes to compensating the real estate representative. So it's one of those, everyone kind of freaked out in the beginning, which is normal. But now that the dust is settled, it really hasn't changed much, because we'll get asked all the time on the lending side, well, how is this changing lending? And we're scratching our heads going, should we have a better answer than nothing? Like, are we missing something? There's not a whole lot changing on our side, right? Which is good, because the less it changes for all of us, the less paperwork and everything we all have to do. The other one we get asked is, can the realtor commissions be financed into the loan? The answer is no. End of discussion on that one. That's just the way it is. That's how Fannie, Freddie, the GSEs, the government-sponsored enterprises have written those rules. And then I'm just going to hit this because I feel like this is one, even as lenders, we have to remind ourselves what these percentages are. So just so you guys know, and we'll email this to everybody, but interested party contributions, IPCs, are basically from any party in the transaction, whether it's lender, title, realtor, builder, right, seller. All of that goes into that percentage, and it's a maximum per each loan program, or loan type, I should say, on what is allowed. If you're doing a conventional loan, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, vanilla deal, right, in Maricopa County, that's $766,000 and change or less for the loan size, not the purchase price. It's 3% is the maximum for those contributions if you're putting less than 10% down. If you're putting upwards of 15% down to, you're at 6%. If you're putting 25% down or more, it's 9%. Here's the kicker that everybody always forgets. Investment properties are 2%, period. So I can't tell you how many times over the years we've seen contracts that come across for 3%, 4%, because they're putting 30% down, but it's a rental property, and we have to, unfortunately, unwind that after everybody's shaken hands and made a deal, right? So keep that one in your back pocket. FHA is 6%. VA is 4%. Jumbo, just for what it's worth, does follow conforming guidelines for the most part, so that's essentially the same. But for FHA and VA, FHA has come out, because earlier FHA was silent on this. FHA did come out and say they're not going to require that those fees, those realtor commissions, be in that 6%, so that's good. VA literally just announced this morning. So it's weird that, again, we're having this panel today, but I guess the universe is talking to us. So same as FHA, those fees now will not be part of the 4%. So that's great news. That was kind of our last lingering, like, is that going to, which would have been shocking, because that's for, our veterans like Tucker, who have done so much for all of us. So that's it on that piece. And then I think that's it. I know we're past our time.
Stuart, can I make just a quick plug? Because I have one of the things I recognize with all of the uncertainty that still exists out there, we continue to do these type of conversations, but practicing what to say and not in front of a client or on a client is so key. So inside of our team, we actually role play every single day, and we have trainings 2 to 3 times a week, mostly on this topic right now because this is the focus. So if anybody wants to join, we have a sign up for that you can go to. It's just CNREN learning.com. And if you sign up, then we'll coordinate for you to come to one of our huddles at 8:30 in the morning via Zoom. You can come in person or to one of the training sessions to help you get just that level of comfort and understanding, because the more we can master this and have the competency, the more comfort and progress we can make with all the change.
Absolutely.
I was going to say the same. If you feel like you're on an island out there or somewhere that you're not getting the help that you need, I know that either of us as leaders would be glad to take more people on and train them on these things. And even if you're not at my brokerage, even if you just want to pick my brain, you would always email me at tucker@thebrokery.com. More than glad to share the things that I've created, the pieces of content that I have. Again, because I've picked these things up from other great agents like John Gletch and other people who I've been fortunate to be around. But always glad to share. If you guys need anything, reach out to either of us and we'll help you with that.
Yeah, that's great. And that goes back to everybody sharing their playbooks, and we're all in it together, and we're in the storm together, and we might as well have some fun with it too, right? So there's a couple more questions for whoever's still hanging on. Cheryl's asking, will builders not offer a buyer broker commission? And if so, where will they advertise it? I don't know if that's...
I've heard that they are reducing those already, but as far as advertising it, they don't all always advertise it. Not all builders are in the MLS as it is. So I think they'll advertise how they always advertise, like you're going to walk in.
And I don't think they're exempt.
Or you're going to call ahead of time when you're doing your tours.
I don't think they're exempt from the rule anyway. So I think that we'd have to give them a call, just like we would another agent, ahead of time and figure it out.
Got it. Okay. All right. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap? Well, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thank you for coming. Aaron, thank you. Tucker, Carin, you guys are badasses. You're top-notch professionals, and I know we feel very honored to be able to run alongside you along all of this. So I appreciate you guys a ton. And I just want to quickly thank, we had some sponsors help us with this. Crystal at WFG, thank you so much. You're always amazing. And we want to thank Inspire Title. And outside of that, you guys have a great rest of the week. Stay positive, and let's keep trucking.